And once again, we want to. Hello again, everyone. I say again because this is the third time we started this tonight. So thank you for hanging in there, even though you haven't seen the first two. Just praise the Lord that He was able to provide for us, because I had a panic attack and thought that I had lost the entire presentation tonight. So the Lord was good, and I've been blessed beyond measure. So thank you so much. 17 years ago today was a special day in my life. And it was a day that Tamara and I got married. And as a result of that, our family started. And I became stepdad to Angela and Rosanna. And they are my daughters in every sense of the word. And I'm so glad that they are. And I want to thank God for blessing me with this family. And so in case you haven't done so yet, please wish us a happy anniversary.
And thanks to those that already have.
And thanks to those that already have, yes. So bear with me just a moment. I'm going to open my PDF and we'll go from there. So thank you for hanging in there. I am now sharing my screen. And here's my PDF. And here is full screen, I think. Having a hard time with Control L, Angela. There we go. There we go. All right. So as you can see, our sermon title today is Blessed Beyond Measure. The reason for that title is that this song, Blessed Beyond Measure, which you've already heard in your worship set, was sung at our wedding 17 years ago by the Lesters. And that has become the life theme for our family, because we truly have been blessed beyond measure. So I wanted to share that with you today. And what better day than our anniversary to have a sermon about the blessings that God gives us. So anyway, as I said, here's a picture of our wedding. 17 years ago today, I married the love of my life. And I got two glorious daughters thrown in as an extra blessing. And you can see that's kind of a look of panic on my face. And I think that our two girls are probably half asleep, because this was about an hour-and-a-half ceremony. So it was pretty tiring standing up there that entire time. But they hung in there, and I do appreciate that. So thank you for hanging in there, girls. So I was pretty terrified, as I said that day. You could tell by the look on my face. And I wondered just what I'd gotten myself into. If only I had known then what wondrous blessings that God had in store for me because of Tamara and the girls. Instead of looking scared up there on the stage, I would have been shouting hallelujah. Did you ever notice that's how God works? He takes delight in letting us wonder how things are going to turn out. We worry and fret, and yet He always comes through for us. Genesis chapter 12, verses 1. Oh, take Abraham, for example. Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3 tells us, Now the Lord had said to Abram, Get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Wow, there's a lot of blessings in there. Bless those that bless you, and you all the nations will be blessed, and I will bless you and your name will be great. Sounds great, right? I'm sure it did, except for the first part. Get out of your land, away from your family, and go to a strange land where I will send you. Okay, piece of cake, right? Just get up, leave everything you know and love behind, and blindly follow me to where I tell you to go. Well, that had to take a lot of faith. You think that Abraham had any doubts or fears about that one? I sure do. I can see him questioning God on a daily basis. I know I would if I were him. But God was faithful. Abraham had to show obedience by following God all the way. But he was rewarded with everything that God had told him it would be his. Can you think of any time in your life God has done that for you? What about Joseph? God showed him a vision in a dream that he would rule over his family. So how did that go for him? Well, Joseph didn't handle it well. He was just a kid, and he annoyed his big brothers by telling them at every opportunity that he would one day be in charge. They didn't take it well. In fact, they were so annoyed with him that they wanted to kill him, literally. They trapped him in a pit, and they told his father he was dead. They sold him into slavery, where he was wrongly accused and convicted of a crime he didn't commit. He is forgotten by a prisoner that he had helped out, and finally was set free after years of false imprisonment. And there he became the second richest and most powerful person in Egypt, where, oh yeah, his family bowed down to him as their ruler, just as God had predicted all those years before. But it took him a while to get there, and he had to go through a lot to get him to that place. God used every bad thing in Joseph's life to position him where he could fulfill that teenage dream. Has anything like that ever happened to you? I'd like to tell you about my first blessing, which really didn't seem like it at the time. When I was in 6th grade, something traumatic happened to me that scared me to death, leaving me asking, why God, virtually every day. I've always had bad teeth. When I was 12, I had a horrible abscessed tooth that was so painful, all I could do was cry from the pain. Mom and Dad rushed me to the dentist, who at first refused to do anything about it. He wanted to give me an antibiotic and send me home until the inflammation was gone, and then pull the tooth. That would have been the wise thing to do, but I was screaming, and somehow they convinced the dentist to pull it anyway. That solved the immediate problem, and with a nice painkiller, I went home and slept it off. All was well. Or so I thought, until it wasn't. The next day, I woke up to find my face paralyzed. My dad called the dentist to find out why my anesthesia hadn't worn off, thinking that that was the issue. The dentist told Dad that it should have worn off a few hours after we got home, and he sent us to a neurologist about 90 miles from home. Like, go now, and by the time we got there, they were expecting us. The neurologist then hospitalized me for further tests. I had all kinds of scary things done to me: spinal taps, electroencephalographs, and a series of tests to see if I had a brain tumor. Needless to say, I was petrified with fear. I cried and pleaded to God, why me? What did I do wrong? What did I do to deserve this? It turned out that I had something called bilateral Bell's palsy, the worst case supposedly in history, or at least the worst case that the doctors had ever seen. I had all kinds of pictures taken, and my story was written up in some neurological journal. We were told that with medication and my palsy would straighten up on its own, and I was sent home. Just prior to this incident, I had tried out for and I made the track team. The doctor said that I should not do any strenuous exercises, so I was excused from the team and I had to drop off of it. I had to go back to see the neurologist 3 times per week for several weeks, so I got way behind in my studies. And I now had this crazy, droopy half smile to remind everyone at school just how different I was, as if I wasn't already socially awkward enough. So how could God use all this to set up a blessing? Inquiring minds really wanted to know. So let's flash forward 6 years. I was now a senior in high school. My guidance counselor was trying to convince me that I needed to go to college. My parents were trying to tell me that college was a waste of time and money that we didn't have, and that I needed to go to work for a local factory, and that if I insisted on going to college, it was all on me. They weren't going to help me. My guidance counselor still thought that I should break the cycle and become the first in my family to go to college. He called me into his office one day and told me of a program that he thought might help me. You have a neurological issue, right? He asked me. The state of Indiana has a program for those who have a disability that will send them to college for free. I want you to talk to them. I protested a little bit, but I did. And the representative said that a droopy smile really wasn't much of a disability, and I shouldn't hold out hope of getting a vocational rehabilitation grant. So I resigned myself to the strong possibility that I couldn't go to college. A few weeks later, an envelope came from the state of Indiana. Mom opened it and said that not only had they approved me for full tuition up to 4 years, they also approved me for a maintenance allowance to help with my rent and my living expenses. While not a lot, that maintenance allowance helped. And the college that I applied to had a work-study program, and they found me a part-time job that finished everything up. So Mom and Dad had to agree that God answered that prayer and that I was supposed to go away to school. They couldn't argue with the situation that was even better than a full ride. So God turned the most traumatic event in my life into something great. If I hadn't gotten the grant, I wouldn't have gone to college. If I hadn't gone to college, I wouldn't have had the career that I had. If I hadn't had the career that I had, I wouldn't have met Tamara. If I hadn't have met her, I wouldn't have moved to Florida. If that hadn't happened, then I wouldn't be where I am today with all the blessings I have. So the traumatic event turned into many awesome things.
Woohoo!
But to get me ready for the blessings, God had to put me through trials.
Yes.
And I think he does that with all of us.
Yeah.
And here's another example from my life. How can the death of a loved one turn into blessings beyond measure? In 1981, I had been on the fast track to a career with the state of Indiana. I was one of only 3 people to write and implement the internal audit department for the Department of Motor Vehicles in Indianapolis. I had accepted a promotion from the Department of Revenue, and I had room for growth there that I didn't have at the Revenue Department. If I'd stayed with the Bureau, I could have been a future commissioner of the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. Sorry for that spelling. Then Dad got ill and died, and things turned around in a hurry. I used up all of my paid leave while he was in the hospital, and then I exceeded them, taking much unpaid leave. I was given a warning from the state of Indiana while my 2 co-workers were doing all the work. In fact, one of them became, just within a couple of years, the deputy commissioner. I got in financial trouble because I wasn't getting paid because I was taking so much time off, and Dad kept getting worse and worse. In January of 1982, we had a seriously imposing blizzard. Mom was staying at one of her sister's houses, a couple of miles from the hospital. Dad had survived a 12-hour surgery that some doctors thought would kill him. It looked like he was going to survive. Then his kidneys quit. The doctors put him on dialysis. He was also on a respirator since his surgery, and communication was tough. Dad heard his doctor say that his breathing was improving, and, quote, if he was good, unquote, the doctor might take the respirator out soon. So Dad didn't wait. When he was alone, he removed the respirator himself. He just yanked it right out. The doctors weren't at all happy about that, and he did damage his throat a little bit, but he could talk again. So now that we could talk, I could communicate with him on things going on in my life, so that was great. One day it was snowing really bad. Mom had stayed at my aunt's house, so I was the only visitor that Dad had that day. He insisted that I go home as he was afraid the roads were too slick. I reluctantly agreed and kissed him goodbye. As I started to leave, he said, "Take care of Mom." Not thinking anything about it, I just said, "Of course I will, Dad. See you tomorrow." But tomorrow never came as Dad passed away that night. So in my job, I had a lot of excessive absences and the extra pressure of my coworkers to get the job done. I was really on hot water. I was on probation, and I was about to lose this once promising career. And in the meanwhile, Mom really needed me at home. The love of her life had passed away, and she didn't know what to do or how to go on. So I decided to quit my job as a traveling auditor for the state, as I couldn't honor my commitment to take care of Mom if I tried to save my job. So I bit the bullet and moved back in with Mom at 29 years old. I kind of felt like a loser at that point. I had moved out at 17 and a half and never looked back. Now here I was, almost 30, and moving back home again without a job. A lot of things happened over the next few years, and I will save those stories for a different time. But the short version is that if I had not moved home, I would not have had my own tax accounting office. And without that, I would not have met the man who introduced me to Tamara, much less married her, and I would not have had this family that has blessed me so much. Nor would I be living in paradise in Florida. The point that I'm trying to make is that of all the blessings in my life, especially for the last 17 years, has been because of Tamara, Angela, and Rosanna. I don't even want to consider what my life would be like without them. And yet, as horrible as Dad's death was, and as much as I miss him, the situation that I am in with the accompanying blessings would not exist if it weren't for his passing when and how he did. So God used that tragedy to bring something better out of it. If Dad had not passed, I would not have moved home. If I had not moved home, I would not have been in a position to have my own tax practice. If I didn't have my tax practice, I would not have met Jack Shipman. And if I'd not met Jack, I would not have met Tamara. If I'd not met Tamara, I'd either not be married or I'd be married to the wrong person.
Or Mary Beth wouldn't have brought you back.
Yes, or God would have had to have intervened again too. And I might still be living in Indiana. So God used all of those things as a step-by-step procedure to get me exactly where he wanted me to be. And that's right here and right now. So that being said, let's learn some lessons from Queen Esther. If you haven't read the book of Esther for a while, I encourage you to do that. It's only 10 chapters, and it says a lot about how God uses the trials to bless us beyond measure. So I'd just like to do a really quick review of that tonight. So through the years, many of you have probably heard the story. The girl who is taken to the palace of King Xerxes and rises up to become queen. She basically won a beauty pageant and got to go to be in the running to be the queen. The king had basically fired her first wife Vashti because he had summoned her to perform a dance for some people that he was trying to impress, and Vashti refused to come. She didn't show up. And so as a result, he divorced her and cast her out of the kingdom. So he had this beauty pageant to determine his future wife. And the most beautiful women in the area were in the kingdom were called to apply. And Esther went, even though she was a foreigner, she was living within the territory. And she basically wound up winning the contest and became the queen of that country. So, yet there's so much more as we dig into this amazing story. It reveals some very powerful truths in its 10 chapters and the realization that God works in mighty ways on behalf of his people. So there are 4 main characters in Esther. There's King Xerxes, who reigned in power at his palace in Persia. He had banished Queen Vashti from his presence when she had refused to come at his order, as we said. So the search for another queen went out through the region. Esther was taken from her home and came to live in the palace along with many other girls of the harem. She is Jewish, but never revealed her nationality or family background, as Mordecai had advised her. God gave her great favor among all there, and she soon became queen. Mordecai was a Jew, and he was Esther's older cousin. He had adopted and raised her after she had lost her parents. He continued to advise Esther and checked on her safety, even after she had been taken to live in the king's palace. As a government official, he reported an assassination plot against the king and saved his life, which later caused the king to become aware of his loyalty and devotion. Haman is the bad guy of the story. He was a descendant of King Agag, an enemy of the Jews. He was given a seat of honor by the king, but pride and lust for power drove him to hate anyone who would not bow down to him. When Mordecai refused, he sought revenge on all of God's people by devising a plot to kill the Jews.
Dun, dun, dun.
God is the only one who can turn trials into blessings.
Yes.
Things in life hadn't gone Esther's way. Often we may read this story and just think of Esther being beautiful and given the royal position of queen, but we forget where she came from. She is orphaned. She had suffered great loss even at a young age. She is then whisked away from her home, her family, and her people, and all she knew, and she was taken to the king's palace, given the load of expectation to succeed. Yet even when gifted with such a royal position, there's still incredible hardship. Her people faced great tragedy and destruction. She surely felt very alone. She faced trial after trial through her life, yet we see in every part of the story there's hope woven throughout, and it's truly the most powerful pieces of the entire book. God is always at work, even when we can't see the whole story, even when things look uncertain, and that sets the stage for great things to happen. In Esther 4:14 we read, "And who knows but that you have come to royal position for such a time as this." God's blessing is greater than our troubles, always. His goodness will shine through. It's just the way he works. Second point is our prayers matter. Our voice matters. Our actions matter, and God is our deliverer. Mordecai knew his voice mattered. Esther knew her actions mattered. And through the wisdom and obedience of these two, God saved his people. Mordecai believed that even if Esther didn't help them, God would send help from a different way. That's how much he trusted in the power of the Lord. He understood that our positions in life were not at all about us, but only about what God would do throughout those powerful places. Excuse me. In Esther 4:14, we read, "For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish." May God help us to be willing to pray, to fast, and to wait for his direction, and then act on the wisdom that he provides. May we be ever faithful to pray for all those in authority, for those who need someone to speak up on their behalf, for those who are being pressed down and persecuted. May we be brave to speak with wisdom and discernment, and to live these days with hearts of compassion and love. May we be strong to follow God's voice, even when it's not the most popular choice in our culture, because sometimes he works through that and surprises everyone. And that brings us to point number 3. God will give us the courage to do all that he asks us to do. Queen Esther had a choice. When Mordecai sent word about the great danger these people were facing, she could have simply tried to save herself. She could have kept quiet and hoped for the best, or even turned the other way. But she and Mordecai both knew that God had given her a great purpose in her position. She was wise. She made a plan, and she didn't stay stuck in fear or worry. She prayed and fasted, and she asked for their people to do the same. She is willing to act, to follow God's lead, and to save the lives of her people, even if it meant that she might lose hers. In Esther 4:15 and 16, we read, "Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai, 'Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will fast just as you do. When all this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish.' She is willing to give her life up to help her people." Though our current situations may look different than what Esther faced, we might still be struggling with great fear or uncertainty. The future may look dark. A hard diagnosis or a recent loss may have sent us spiraling. Yet God often places us in positions of influence or in strategic locations with great purpose in mind. Many times the places where we find ourselves is not really about us at all. It's about him, and it's about his bigger plan. Our next point is God is able to bring great favor and blessing on our lives. From the moment that Esther was in the king's palace, she was given protection and favor. The Bible even says that she won the favor of all those she was around, and God blessed her greatly, allowing her to be made queen. That's important because without great favor from the king, Esther could have been put to death simply for asking to come in his presence without being summoned. In Esther chapter 5, verses 1 through 3, we read, "On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king asked, 'What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be given to you.' Because of great favor, Esther was allowed to carry out the plan that would eventually save her people. The king was willing to come to the banquet prepared for Haman and himself, not once, but twice. The purposes of God were being set. Haman would soon meet his demise, and the Jews would be saved. When we belong to God through Christ, we have a protection the world around us may never understand. It doesn't mean that we won't face trials. We surely will, but when we do, his strength and his blessings still come out even stronger. Next point is God will always be faithful to lead us and to fight on our behalf. As Queen Esther and Mordecai moved through these, I'm going to have to move my page around a little bit. As Queen Esther and Mordecai moved through these critical days and worked on behalf of their people, every plan was carefully timed, and each purpose was carried out to the glory of the Lord. In the end, the tables were turned, and those who were plotting against the Jews were destroyed. No one could stand against them because the people of all other nationalities were afraid of them, Esther 9:2. The plan to kill the Jews had been stopped. There was great fear of God all around. His reputation became known throughout the land, even to the point that many people of other nationalities even became Jews because the fear of the Jews had seized them. That was Esther chapter 8, verse 17. With God, even our enemies will flee. His power can never be thwarted or destroyed. He is with us, guiding us and carrying us, and covering us from behind at every moment. May God help us to follow his lead, believing that his timing is perfect and remembering that he's always faithful to fight for us still today. May he help us to know when to keep quiet and wait, and when to speak out on behalf of others, and in sharing his truth. He won't leave us on our own to fend for ourselves in difficult places. His power can't help but to come to our rescue. His faithfulness and mercies are new every morning. Our next point is pride is a trap, but humility is key. By the time that Mordecai told Esther about the evil plot against the Jews, Esther was in high places. She could have turned her back on her people, proud of where she was in life, and happy about her own success and power. Yet she did just the opposite. She actually risked her life for her people. That is true humility. Being willing to look at the needs of others before yourself, not thinking too highly of yourself, even if the world would say that you have much to be proud of. That's true humility. Haman chose just the opposite path. He devised a plan to ultimately make himself look better and destroy a people that wouldn't bend the knee to him. He was prideful and full of selfishness and hate. Ultimately, it destroyed him. The whole story plays out like a great movie plot. It's amazing how God used every bit of Haman's evil plan and turned it back on himself and his own life. The Jews were saved, and Mordecai was given honor. And our final point is God is sovereign over all, and he lovingly cares for his people. So if you find yourself facing times of trouble or testing right now, be assured that God is at work in your situation. He is working within you and on your behalf in all of the events that surround you, no matter how difficult. This life-changing truth is a major theme of the book of Esther. God is sovereign. He reigns over everything, and nothing takes him by surprise. We never read about God not knowing what to do. He's not up in heaven wringing his hands together, trying to figure out a plan. Light is greater than darkness, every time. It is the only way to wade through every deep river of difficulty. Know that God is God, and even when we go through dark times, and know that this dark time is a necessary step for God to get us positioned so that he can bless us beyond measure. So trust him. And that brings us to our priestly blessing for the week, taken from Numbers 6, 24 through 26, and you can all say this with me. May the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. In the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. God bless you all.